Cody Phillips says, hey, Mike, why do we have to have an ordained pastor to get married? Is there scripture to back this up? If two people make a commitment to each other and God, is that enough? It's coffee time. Back to reality. Okay, so there is no scripture, to my knowledge, there's nowhere in the Bible that suggests that you need any sort of leader of any kind to get married. None. Now, the Bible also, let me add a few extra things here. It doesn't tell you, here's the format of how you get married. It doesn't say you don't need a leader. like you need to not have a leader or something like that. It just doesn't model for us. So all we have is a model, not a teaching on how it works. We have a model, an example. It doesn't model for us any involvement of the government or of any agencies or of any sort of approved individuals outside of your own family that you are needed to get married. Now, it does model, in many cases, marriage that is approved of by the relatives, in particular by the parents. So if you were to suggest that there's something required, you might suggest that. But again, I think this is a model and not a requirement. Marriage seems to regularly involve in Scripture, as I understand it. So you have one man, one woman. That's every time. You typically have the agreement of their families. And maybe in every instance that where there's a family to agree, Adam and Eve obviously didn't have a family to agree, but God obviously, agreed with this marriage. He designed it. But when you have like Jacob going to get his wives, he talks to Laban or Laban. I think I always say Laban, just out of bad habit. But anyway, he talks to the relatives to get their approval for it. When you have like Isaac and Rebecca, there's an agreement of the relatives, and so there seems to be an importance here of the relatives. Does that mean that you can only get married? No, I'm just saying that if you're asking for what seems ideal, that seems part of the ideal. Now, some would say, well, Mike, that's just culture. Culture just had it that way. And if you'll say that, and maybe you're right, maybe it's just reflective of culture, then what you're actually making a case for is perhaps we should look at culture and consider what things culture is saying about marriage. Now, it can't undo, say, for instance, very importantly, that the nature of marriage is male-female. That is like created by God that way. The model of other things we see comes later. But what I'm going to suggest is this. I guess I'll just shortcut to the end. I don't think you need an ordained pastor to get married. I don't think you need a pastor to get married. I don't think you need the government to get married. I think you need two people who are genuinely committed to each other. One man, one woman. There are no other combinations that make a marriage real. One man and one woman, one lifetime. That's the combination that makes marriage. If you are in a community, you probably want to be open and real about this incredibly important central relationship in your life. It only makes sense to at least make sure the community's aware of this. If you say, we're married, shh, don't tell anybody. Is that real? Is that commitment real when it's secret? Right? Like imagine you're hanging out at school and someone tells you like, hey, I want you to know you're my best friend. You're my best friend, but don't tell anybody. Are they really your best friend? If you get married and you don't want the community involved and you just want it to be like the secret thing between the two of you, are you really committed? Is this really a marriage even at that point? So I think these are questions that come up. So yeah, I think that even legally, say in the United States, I don't know what country you're in, but in the US, you don't need an ordained pastor to get married. You could go to the courthouse and get it taken care of. And now it's a legal marriage. You should, it seems wise to get this legal marriage and not just a commitment that you would say is the bare minimum of what counts as a marriage, because of a number of issues. Like for instance, if one of you dies, the other one has certain rights as a spouse. Okay, that's kind of a big deal. It's kind of important. And if, you should probably do that. You'd have to have some really strong reason not to. Yeah. I've also noticed that the people I've known who they sort of fell into marriage where they call it marriage, but it's not technically legally a marriage, and they never like had a moment with themselves and their family where they were like, we're married. This is my spouse. I love them and I'm committed to them for life. But rather they were just together, living together for years. And at some point they just started calling each other husband and wife. I know people like that. They tend to be less committed in those relationships, possibly as a result. Just my own anecdotal observation that's there. Is that really a marriage? I'm, if they say that's my wife, I'm committed to them in marriage, I'm going to believe that. Okay. I'm going to believe that statement. Why would I not? But I'm concerned about the lack of honestly, the lack of a sense of formality to it that seems like it belongs. I hope that answers your question. Using a pastor, an ordained pastor to get married, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with it. I think it's a nice thing. Is it necessary? No, it's weird that we feel like it's necessary. That's a little weird, in my opinion. Even worse, if your pastor, you feel, has to approve of who you marry. If you're part of a church like that, I'm worried.